Hello, I am Simon.
Hi, I'm James.
And we are 2/3 of Biffy Clyro, and today we are going to talk you through our 5 favourite MTV Unplugged performances, which may or may not culminate in our own MTV Unplugged performance.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And at 5, where we go, George Michael.
I think George Michael, such an iconic performer, so many great songs. What a voice.
What a voice. Sadly missed, and we watched the George Michael performance before we were doing our own MTV Unplugged, and it was the worst thing we could have done because he has the voice of an angel and I have the voice of the devil. So I was very aware that I couldn't sing like George. He does this wonderful kind of orchestra and everything, and it's in that era when he just looked so good. He just looked $1 million, and quite obviously we don't look $1 million.
It's amazing when you've got 50 people on stage and you just can't take your eyes or you can't take your ears away from George. George's voice just soars above the orchestra, and it's just, what a performance, what a performance. We miss you.
We miss you, George. Number 4.
It's a tough one. They're all tough. They start to get pretty good from here on in.
Was George not good enough? Who would you go to number 4?
At number 4, it's maybe Roxette.
Roxette.
I think probably.
I'm a huge Roxette fan.
Big part of your childhood, wasn't it?
Big part of my, and it's turned into a really big part of my adulthood as well, because I went through the period of denying that I ever loved Roxette, and now I'm happy with that. I love Roxette. Proud.
Yeah, occasionally we get a wee snippet of Roxette at some of our own live shows. Simon will sing a few bars now and again, which is often quite fun.
It must have been Love. It's probably one of the best songs ever written.
Yeah.
And I just think they're fantastic. It's hard to kind of imagine how big and omnipresent Roxette were for a while. And back then, I was into like punk rock and noisy music, and I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that I would like well-written songs and pop music. And in this performance, you know that these guys know what they're doing. It's pop, but they do it all themselves. And Per, I think, is the kind of brains behind it, and he's a genius. And they went on tour last year, and I almost went with my brother, but I couldn't persuade him to go. So Gordon, I really wanted to go, man. I really wanted to go. So I'm going to have to make do with watching Roxette's MTV Unplugged.
Absolutely.
So you do it too.
Number 3, for me, probably Pearl Jam.
Pearl Jam
in at number 3. There's some. First thing to mention about Pearl Jam's performance, and I totally missed this in the 90s, but there's just some real questionable fashion choices out there. I guess that was a sign of the 90s, really, It
was a sign of the 90s. When a man can wear 3 hats at the same time and think that's all right, that is quite out there, Jeff Ammon. That is.
But the way Pearl Jam just walk on stage so casually, and they start with this song called Oceans, and Jeff's on his fretless bass, and it's just such a beautiful sound, and the band just kind of meander into that song in such a beautiful way. And then of course they go on to State Love and Trust, which is just one of the best songs ever.
Yeah, I think the fact that they would play a B-side, Pearl Jam played B-sides, and we'll talk about Nirvana in a minute too. The song choices I think were really interesting, and that was something we wanted when we were doing our Unplugged. We wanted to do some B-sides and do a cover and just kind of do things a little different, because it's such a challenge, especially to a rock band, because you're so used to using volume as a tool, and once the volume's taken away, you feel like you've one hand tied behind your back, but it's a nice challenge. I think it's something that we were happy to embrace, and quite obviously Pearl Jam nailed it. So Eddie Vedder being very intense in this performance
as well.
And so yeah, you got to see it. Pearl Jam Unplugged. Number 2, I'd probably go. Now, we were going to put ourselves in the top 5, but we can't do that. It's just, we're Scottish. Our egos aren't quite big enough. But if there was a top 6, but we would be in it. Number 2, I'll say Neil Young. A lot of these Unplugs we're talking about are from the 90s, and that was kind of our coming of age as music fans. And the Neil Young performance, I had never heard of Neil Young. Pearl Jam had referenced him in like a couple of interviews, but I didn't know who he was, and in that era he had the long hair and a beard. What kind of idiot has long hair and a beard? and I didn't know who he was, and he just had this wonderfully fragile voice, and there's a couple of songs he just plays with him and like a pump organ, and and he plays like a Hurricane and just Needling the Damage Done, and just songs that I didn't know existed, and the performances that he gives in that are just so pure and perfect, and I really think of that as the perfect version of Neil Young in my mind. And
that's the great thing about all the MTV Unplugged, really, is it kind of maybe opens the door to a new audience. You know, it's a different type of performance from all those bands, whether it's Pearl Jam, Neil Young, you know, they're performing their songs in a different arena, a different way, so I guess it kind of opens the door to different fans.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best example. Neil Young had released a few records by the time he did that, but yeah, I hadn't heard of him, so you know, that's the beauty of Unplugged. It does pull people into music that perhaps they haven't been exposed to. Number 1, Biffy Clyro, Nirvana. It's got to be Nirvana. We can't be a 3-piece rock band and not pick Nirvana, and it's so iconic, that performance now, and you know, everyone knows all the details of how kind of messed up Kurt Cobain was at the time, but the fact of the matter is, when that came out, people knew it was a special performance, and this was a band that was so abrasive. You know, he's got such a great screaming voice. They were always basically a punk rock band, and they just managed to show that, hey, these songs, they might work when they're noisy, but they really work stripped back. And as a bunch of really young guys watching that, wanting to make music, it taught us that the songs should work without the distortion and everything. And I think it made people take Nirvana really seriously at that point. You know, people who'd been around for a while, I think, suddenly realised, right, wait, something special's happening here. And yeah, we recorded our own version of Nirvana Unplugged back in the day, where we just copied the whole thing. We did all the songs, we did all the chat in between, and I can't find the cassette, but we did it, and it's really quite embarrassing. But also, it's wonderful how life works. That a moment like that in our childhood can end up coming full circle, and we get to do our own Unplugged. So it's probably our biggest influence was this performance by Nirvana.
Absolutely, and another great thing about that performance is they opened our ears to other bands with the covers they did with the Meat Puppets and Vaseline.
And Bowie as well, a Bowie song I'd never ever heard of.
Just incredible, and you know, it's such a big influence on us. It really what he does to be a band. You know, we were already dreaming of it at that point, but I think that just definitely took us over the edge. And for us to then go back and, like you said, for us to do MTV Unplugged it's still mind-blowing, I think, even a couple of months later.
Yeah, it is, so we're very proud.
So we hope you guys enjoy our MTV Unplugged.
Check out those 5 and then the very best one, ours. Thanks for watching.